Okay, what we're doing, I assume everyone knows by now that's watching it all out there, is the second part of the show is I'm the one selected for this quarter, or this week, but I'm going back to the Kyroots, as you just heard right on the first part, and people have requested, they're numbered, and a number flashes up, and then they're requesting certain pages, and I am trying to make, if possible, some additional comment. Well, first, there is a little business. For those of you who are interested out there on cable, if you'd like to have a program guide to all of this, if you'll write to our home office in Bergen, Norway. But please allow anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks before you decide that we're not going to send you one. Well, it's because we don't have one. I don't mean any offense. And also some of the letters we received, I can't. Well, there's one I wanted to mention there. We've had many requests from around this area here in Oslo, and even some now from Finland. But anyway, I wanted to say yes, we've had many requests for some reason from psychiatrists who wanted to come here and be a part of the studio audience and visit. And we'd be glad to have you. The only thing I would ask is, please, would you wear those little funny white coats so that I can tell you from the rest of the audience? Which those of you don't never... It's a little joke about why the psychiatrists have to wear those little coats, because they don't do anything to get blood on them or even grease. They don't work on transmissions, in case you never thought about it. And the reason they had to start doing that was in hospitals, mental health hospitals. For a long time, there was a continuing problem of people being able to tell the patients from the... Of course, then you can say, well, why do priests dress funny? All those weird stuff throughout history and pop. Just remember that, how would you feel if you went into a mental hospital and you went, which is it's not just a joke either, folks. I have known people that was in there, at the expense of the state, who ended up treating people. And other psychiatrists come in and consult. All right, here we go. But anyway, so that was kind of the joke, but I even liked that one better. But I guess I had to run it for some of you. Was asking the psychiatrists if they come here to wear their coats so I could tell them from you guys. So you figure that one out. And Kyroot said, once upon a time, this was page 4, but to tell you the truth, it was sort of connected if you'd like to try and follow this. And Kyroot said, it was page 3, as he would pet and shower his dog with affection, this one man would often repeat parts of the multiplication tables to the dog. He explained that it was a test. It was a test he was hoping to learn something from, but it was a test that he wanted to learn something about him, not the dog. I don't want to ruin it too much, but just think, you're trying to do something on one level, just absolute good physical animal type affection. And any of you who ever pet animals, you're very inclined, I hope, so that some of us don't feel silly, that you can be petting a dog and you say things like, good old Spot, good boy, how you doing? But this guy instead would just start saying 2 and 2 is 4 and 4 and 4 while doing it. So it was a test. He was trying to learn something. Page 4. The next page. Once upon a time, there was a man who decided that it was impossible to fool the secondary world, parentheses, and he further concludes that even if it was possible, it'd kill you for your effort. Would anybody like to consider what we've been talking about in the description we have used, the ad hoc delineation of life as man knows it into a primary and a secondary that is not absolutely, or is not quantitatively divisible, but is a gradual process with the overlapping, and the Pacific time zone still exists in Greenwich Mean Time, and there's all the simultaneous existence. This, in that sense, and there are several other Kyroots in here, whether we get to it or not, in a sense, the primary world is the only one that can be serious. There's a Kyroot in here tonight about the primary world is serious on the basis that it never says it is, and by dint of it saying so, the secondary is not. And by dint of it saying so, it's not that by talking is what makes it unserious, but the point is, the primary world is serious without having to say anything. We've been through versions of this. If those of you that didn't grow up in Alabama or did not have the benefit of growing up perhaps in a family of bricklayers and plumbers, There's an old thing known around some of the higher class establishments in the evening where people go to drink adult beverages and have fun. It says that if a guy says that he's going to hit you, don't sweat it. The primary world does not have to talk. The inference being, if somebody's going to hit you, by the time you can think, I wonder if he's going to hit me, or I wonder if he's going to say he's going to hit me. If the guy's going to hit you, he's going to hit you. The primary world does not have to talk. If a man starts a discussion about, well, where shall we dine? Then he is not, to go back to that kind of division that at least we can talk about, for exemplary reason between the primary and the secondary, he is now somewhat secondarily hungry as opposed to primary hungry. Because if he was starving, he wouldn't talk about where let's go eat. Now, if you don't like that, if we want to get more sleazy, if we were still in times where such things was socially acceptable and a man was driven by those kinds of erotic urges that sometimes make fuzz grow out on a moose's horns, he would just jump the first thing that came by, a woman, perhaps, as opposed to a Davenport or an overnight bed. As opposed to thinking, well, who will I call? Or, hey, mama, what's your sign? The primary world does not have to talk. And in a sense, that does not cause one of the others, I'm sure all of you can realize. But to put it into words, the Kyroot that point out that the primary world is serious because it doesn't talk, it's not because it doesn't. But you understand, when you are serious, you don't talk. It's not necessary. And the primary world, every aspect of what we've been describing as the primary world, the kind of basic, inescapable hungers, needs, and drives that would just keep man, the physical animal, alive, do not need to talk. There's nothing having to do with any need to verbalize to feed the body. If you were back to a kind of feral condition and you were hungry, starving, we're talking about primary hunger, and you went in your backyard, you'd start looking for grubs or berries or whatever it was, there's nothing to talk about. Nothing. That is the epitome of seriousness. The secondary world, in a sense, it does not cause it, it's not talk that makes it unserious, but the secondary world, all of that which grows out of being hobbies, that are hobbies growing out of the original primary needs, all the things that entertain a man now, they cannot be entertaining, they cannot even exist without talk. The fourth S, besides the three primary S's that we mentioned of sex, sustenance, and shelter, and then S being speech, it is now, to be civilized, to live in the city metaphorically and symbolically and literally. You must speak. Even if you had to go, you've got to speak. This guy was pointing out, he said it was impossible to fool the primary world. Now, if you were in some way going to fool the primary world, what would you have to do? Well, for one thing, we're really breaking into the spatial reality of a 3 and even 4-dimensional world, because you would have to be able to deal in speech with the primary world. That's the only way you can fool it. Because even the primary, if we spoke about your primary world and you were there starving at a primary level and you go out and you pick out a berry and you've never seen it and you just put it in your mouth and you eat it, or you start to bite it and it tastes like an old recap from Sears and you go, pfft. You can't call that being fooled. And you would have nothing to say about it. If you were out there working at the primary level, operating at the primary level, and you put this thing in your mouth that you didn't like when you were starving, so you're not talking, it's serious business, it's primary business, and you go, you don't talk. If you were still operating at that level, you don't turn around and say, who in the world put these berries in my backyard? You wouldn't holler for your wife, come out here and cut down this berry tree. Boy, I hate these kind of berries. If you could fool the primary world in some way, it would involve talk. So you have already fractured at least the abiding structure of the 3-dimensional world. So this guy says that he's decided it's impossible to fool the primary world. Those of you that forgot, I said, and Kyroot didn't disagree, that was connected to this guy that was doing primary physical things with his dog, a primary creature, and instead of talking with the kinds of things that normally go along with such, he began to say 2 and 2 is 4, 4 and 4 is... And then this guy comes along on page 4, which comes right after page 3. And he says is you cannot fool the primary world. But then he says, but even if you could, what would be your reward? He concludes that for your effort, it would kill you. But if you could fool the primary world, it would not have to kill you individually. It'd kill everybody. Because the fracture would then be not morbific. It would be mortal. You would be done for. We'd all be done for. Because the primary world cannot be fooled. Which is, if you get a glimpse of it in that way, is another part of the, sometimes we call it humor, but the speciousness of people believing, the environmentalists, that, well, we're about to destroy the planet. Because that's exactly what they're talking about, that we're about to fool the primary world. Yes, sirree. I mean, if you want to have something to worry about and you got nothing better, go ahead. But you cannot fool the primary world. But if you can, then they're right. We're done for. Those of you at home that happen to notice a clock or anything, Kyroot spent so much time tonight that we're short. And wouldn't you know it's tonight, and I had this agent was going to look in tonight, and he's going to try to get me booked on, well, he's trying to get me booked on that, what do they call it? Bowling for hernias? Or what's that? It's that Saturday morning sports show for people that are not, very athletic. I can roll up my sleeves, but I'm not sure I can walk like David Hume. I was asking a lot. I guess we missed that one. Nobody liked that. Kind of covered it all. It was a three-pronged approach. I'm not going to go back and look for it, but the guy was going, if it didn't work, he was going to wax his thighs, roll up the sleeves on his T-shirt, and try and walk like David Hume, at least. Didn't say Thomas Hobbes. And Kyroot said, the so-called, quote, excesses of human nature which poets, philosophers, religious people have written about, whined about, carped about, declaimed about for God knows how long. The so-called excesses of human nature are but the fulfillment of what a human wants. It is. Think about it. Now, if you'd never thought about it before, if you just read and it was some poetic, I can't quote anybody right now, whining about, or even apparently in some metaphysical way pointing out the dangers, the spiritual flaws and errors of the, are you ready? That means either quotes or beavers are coming. Quotes. Well, I saw somebody do it one. I thought at first they meant that there were, beavers were on the way. But it means quote. All right. If you're reading like this metaphysical poet or this spiritual essay, and it starts to mention the excesses of human nature. Now, if you're just an ordinary, intelligent, sophisticated person, you'd never question it, and you could probably fill in, or you know about where it's going, but whatever they said specifically, it would just strike you as being reasonable. That they start the excesses, gluttony, being an alcoholic, maybe having a little wine's all right, or being a little aggressive might be all right, but my God, going out and starting wars, just history. Your own neighborhood, your own life, well, not yours personally, of course, people you know, is just replete with the excesses of human nature, and nobody questions it. It just seems to be true. What people overeat, they overdrink, they overfun, the excesses. Let me ask you this, though. Have you ever been engaged in having fun, fulfilling a need, and right at the moment, in any way, thought, unless you were a priest maybe or something, you're having a tumor, and thought, my God, I am contributing to the gross, the unholy, and then you'd go, excesses of human nature, and the answer is no. Now, I'm sure there are people that's thought that, but they're sick. And well, now after the fact they can. Now, I'm not an idiot. Well, I'm not. We don't have time to. I don't have time to offer any proof if I have. I'm not talking about after the fact, because if you overindulge, if your fun is the consumption of, even though I wasn't really talking religious, but if you like to bibble in spirits, the kinds that come in bottles, then the next day you can, after you have overindulged, have the big hangover and all that. But at the time, there's no such thing as the excesses of human nature. But think about it. If you follow what I said, and as you know, it's not to take up for drinking or taking up for anything, but it is an accepted part of the thinking of civilized men, reasonable men, sophisticated men. You don't have to be religious, but that there are excesses of human nature. And you just accept it. Well, where'd they come from? I mean, how did something get to be an excess of human nature? The best example is, it's a hangover. The excess of human nature is 12 hours later, or even sooner. If it's not alcohol, then while you're eating, people do not say, well, I'm contributing. I am being a despicable, a condemnable participant, contributor to the excesses of human nature if I have 2 more pieces of this pizza. You have them, maybe a few hours later or 30 minutes, it doesn't matter when, but it's got to be after the fact that you might go, Jesus, I ate too much again. And then somebody can say, well, I was just reading Coleridge again. And you think, yeah, did he grow any? No, but he was rhapsodizing himself about the excesses of human nature. And you think, well, I should read more poetry. And I damn sure should read more poetry than spend my time eating this kind of stuff. But it's got to be a few minutes later, because at the time that you put that in your mouth, you have no conception whatsoever that you are engaged in the excesses of human nature. So again, we're playing with the fact that you have to look backwards. You have to see the struggle between the excesses of human nature, which in some way is, by ordinary views, condemnable. Could be looked at as a kind of struggle between, if not good and evil in a spiritual sense, between proper behavior and improper behavior. But there was another Kyroot tonight, 20 seconds, pointing out that the landscape, the participants, the characters in religion, but take it now, religion, the acceptable and unacceptable behavior is simple. But in the religious context, what Kyroot pointed out was the gods, the demons are changed, and God is the status quo. So everybody wants back to the primary level. They want the status quo. Is why they speak about the excesses of human nature. That is, Sunday morning after the hangover, or 30 minutes after eating too much pizza, what you want then is you want to be godly. You don't have to be religious, but what you want now is you will either chime in yourself and add about the excesses of human nature, or you'll agree when somebody brings up Coleridge. Okay, have it your way. Then you'll agree, but it has to be after the fact. But what you're asking for is the status quo back. That is, that's people trying to repent. It's not a revolution, it's quitting. But all repent. All attempts to reform is an attempt to get back to the guides. That is, I want the status quo back. Jesus. Let me go with this and I'll never drink again. I guess we're gone. Bye.